Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When ex-security expert Matt Harper built his dream fortress home, he wanted peace. What he got was war, with the neighborhood's power-hungry HOA president. But when she broke into his house, she triggered more than alarms. She ignited a battle she couldn't win. I moved into Hollow Ridge with one goal: peace. After 15 years designing high-security systems for banks, law firms, and federal contractors, I figured I'd earned a quiet life with my wife and kids. Our new house sat on a 2-acre lot at the far end of a cul-de-sac, nestled between pines and rock outcrops, separated by elevation from the identical beige boxes that made up the rest of the neighborhood. It was modern, minimalistic, secure, and entirely outside the jurisdiction of the local HOA, Hollow Ridge Heights. That was the most important detail on the purchase contract. I'd made sure of it. The house was mine in every legal, physical, and digital sense. I built it from scratch with contractors I trusted. Everything, from the triple-reinforced front door to the underground backup generator, was wired through a custom control panel I had coded myself. Cameras, thermal sensors, biometric locks, passive IR detectors, seismic floor triggers, 2 cloud backups, and a direct alert system to the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. It wasn't just secure, it was a statement. Naturally, that didn't sit well with Karen Dabbs. She showed up at our door 2 days after we moved in. 60-ish, stiff posture, red blazer like she was running for local office, and a clipboard clasped to her chest like a holy relic. Her smile was tight, fake, but the kind of fake you don't acknowledge unless you want to start a war. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, eyes scanning over my porch lights like she was inspecting a crime scene. "I'm Karen, president of the Hollow Ridge Heights HOA." I nodded politely and waited. She launched into a speech about community standards, architectural guidelines, and voluntary contributions to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. Then she handed me a packet, 30 pages thick, and pointed at the highlighted fee, $650. I blinked. "Thanks, but my property isn't part of the HOA." She hesitated. "Well, that's not ideal. You're adjacent. In spirit, you're part of it. I'll stick with legal definitions, thanks." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "Sometimes it's better to be a team player, Mr. Harper." "Sometimes," I said, smiling, "but not always." She left with a smile that had gained a fracture, and I watched her march off like a general who'd just lost her first skirmish. That week, I got my first letter. A printed notification of observed violations slipped under the gate. My porch lights were too bright. The front mailbox did not conform to neighborhood standards. There was a typo in the word violation. I laughed, tossed it in the shredder, and made a mental note. She wasn't letting this go. I wasn't surprised when more notes came. A few were anonymous, complaints about my kids' chalk drawings on the driveway, or about the unusually shaped fence posts. Others bore HOA letterhead that wasn't legally binding, but looked official enough to trick someone less experienced. Unfortunately for her, I deal with breaches for a living. Just to be safe, I ran a check on the property boundaries again and had a copy of the title and plat map printed and notarized. I updated my home network firewall and increased logging to full detail. I set motion detectors around the perimeter to auto-trigger the floodlights and backup camera angles. And before we left for Hawaii, I activated the full home lockdown system. I didn't tell Karen we were going away. I didn't tell anyone but Dave, my neighbor 2 lots over. He's a good guy. Ex-Marine, no love for HOA nonsense. Said he'd keep an eye on things, but I wasn't worried. My system was designed to log, track, and alert faster than any break-in could escalate. Still, I had this itch. Not a gut feeling, I don't believe in that. More like a technical suspicion. Karen didn't strike me as the type to let go. And the way she looked at my house like it was a problem to be solved didn't sit right, so I ran a test. I left a secondary route open through the garage access panel, sealed physically, but monitored digitally, just in case someone thought they could get clever. Then we left for the islands. Sun, sand, and silence. At least for 6 days. On the 6th morning in Maui, I was sitting on the balcony of our rental with a mug of bitter hotel coffee and a ridiculous plastic lei around my neck, watching my kids argue over who could build the biggest sand volcano. My phone buzzed. Not the usual one. I'd left that off for vacation mode. This was my satellite backup reserved for emergencies. Alert: unauthorized entry, front door accessed, 6:17 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Motion detected. Main hallway, 6:19 a.m. Mountain Standard Time internal movement. Kitchen, dining, child's bedroom. My fingers clenched around the ceramic mug. I tapped into the live feed. And there she was, Karen Dabbs, in my house. She wasn't breaking in like a thief. No crowbar, no smashed window. She'd used the front door, likely jimmied the lock or found a way past the external access control, maybe even copied an old delivery code. But she was inside, alone, holding her tablet like a badge, walking through my living room like she owned the place. I zoomed in on her face, calm, calculated. Her eyes roamed across shelves, cabinets, the layout. She wasn't panicking. She was hunting. I tapped another feed. Audio synced up. Her voice filtered through the overhead mic in the hall. "We've got potential violations here," she said to someone on the phone. "I'm documenting everything. He's hiding equipment. Illegal server nodes, probably. It's enough to build a case." I watched her open a cabinet in the kitchen and peer inside. She took a photo. Then she made her way upstairs. The kids' room. That's when I felt the shift. This wasn't petty HOA madness anymore. This was personal. She entered the bedroom, scanned the furniture, opened the closet. She touched my daughter's drawing pad, flipped through it absently, and kept talking. Unsafe conditions in the children's space. No guardrails on the bed. I'll get CPS involved if I have to. My system logged it all. Every word, every movement, every goddamn fingerprint. The biometric system recognized her unauthorized presence and had already escalated the alert. I took a deep breath and triggered the emergency override. 30 seconds later, my home's AI had sent a priority notification directly to the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, marked with live video and incident metadata. She didn't know it yet, but she'd tripped a cascade I'd designed for worst-case intrusion. She came back downstairs, walked into the wine room, looked around, opened a bottle, a gift from a former client worth $900, tucked it into her oversized tote like it was a souvenir. Then she printed something on the home office printer, a mock inspection form with an HOA header I hadn't seen before. "Just a little more," she muttered, "enough to show cause. Then we get him." At that moment, the front yard camera picked up movement. 2 marked units from the sheriff's department pulling up. Karen stepped outside and nearly walked into the responding officer. I could hear her voice through the audio, suddenly frantic. "Wait. This is a misunderstanding. I'm the president of the HOA. I was inspecting for safety. The front door was open." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for unlawful entry, trespassing, suspected theft, and violation of private residential security. Hands where I can see them." I watched, live, as she froze. She looked over her shoulder, toward the camera on the eave, and it finally registered. She wasn't alone. Someone had been watching the entire time. They cuffed her on my front porch. She kept sputtering protest as if repeating, "I'm the president of the HOA," would grant her diplomatic immunity. As they led her down the walkway, her tablet slipped out of her bag and hit the concrete. I smiled. My system had already synced all the footage to 3 different cloud vaults. Every single second was time-stamped, mirrored, and backed up. I had what I needed. Karen had walked into a fortress. And now she was walking straight into a cell. The day we flew back from Maui, I had nearly 24 unread emails from reporters, 3 voicemails from HOA board members, and 1 very polite letter from a lawyer with a firm I didn't recognize, asking for clarification of recent events. I ignored them all. I wasn't in the mood to clarify anything. We landed just before midnight, kids asleep on our shoulders, the humid island air still clinging to our skin. The house was in perfect condition. Everything was exactly where it should have been, except for the new yellow evidence tags the deputies had placed throughout the entryway, a minor inconvenience. The sheriff's department had already assured me they'd completed their initial walkthrough and cleared the property. I spent the next morning downloading the full archive from the home server. 8 separate camera feeds, 5 high-gain microphone recordings, 32 movement events logged, time-stamped, and categorized. I watched them all again, carefully, frame by frame, not out of paranoia, out of precision. Karen's walk through our home had lasted 11 minutes and 46 seconds. In that time, she committed no fewer than 6 distinct felonies and possibly 2 federal violations, depending on how the prosecutor classified her access to our internal network via the desktop. The footage of her printing that forged inspection form was golden. Her voice on the audio feed talking about calling CPS and building a case against me was practically a confession. It wasn't just brazen, it was delusional. Later that afternoon, the story broke locally. HOA president arrested in alleged break-in at tech engineer's smart home. I wasn't the source, but I didn't have to be. Someone at the sheriff's office had clearly leaked the arrest report. I read the article out loud in the kitchen while sipping coffee. According to the homeowner's security logs I read, the suspect triggered an automated police dispatch after entering without authorization. The homeowner, currently out of state, monitored the incident remotely. My wife shook her head. She's insane. She's also toast, I said. The media attention brought the rest of the roaches out of the walls. By the end of the day, my inbox had filled with emails from other residents in Hollow Ridge Heights. Some were furious, calling the arrest a misunderstanding, demanding I drop charges, saying Karen was only trying to keep the neighborhood safe. Others were something else entirely. One man named Douglas wrote, "She entered our house last Thanksgiving, said she was checking smoke detectors. My wife nearly had a panic attack." A woman named Anita. "We told her not to go around back when we weren't home. She did it anyway." Took photos of our laundry room. Another neighbor, Steve, claimed she'd once let herself into his garage during a routine trash bin compliance check. He'd dismissed it back then. Now he wasn't so sure. I realized something chilling. What happened to me wasn't the first time. It was just the first time someone caught her red-handed, on video, with system logs, with audio. Karen had been doing this for years. I reached out to the sheriff's office and shared the messages. I handed over contact info for the neighbors. The detective in charge, a calm, pragmatic guy named Morales, was intrigued. "If she's been doing this under color of HOA authority," he said, "we might be looking at pattern behavior, abuse of power, maybe even racketeering if money's involved." He wasn't wrong. The following morning, I received a call from the detective again. They'd secured a warrant and executed a search of Karen's house. "Are you sitting down?" Morales asked. I was. "We found a tablet full of photos from inside your home and others. Some of them dated over the past 2 years. She had files labeled with residents' names, complaints, satellite images, screenshots from social media accounts, property maps, even estimated income brackets. Yours had a red flag. It said, and I quote, 'Doesn't comply. Possible tech contractor. Monitor for surveillance.'" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so fundamentally outrageously pathetic. She had made a file on me, color-coded. Morales continued. "She had a printed map of your house, your floor plan, with dots showing where she thought cameras were located. Ironically, she missed the thermal sensors in the bedroom and the audio mic in the ceiling. Of course she did. Those were designed to evade people exactly like her. Later that day, a reporter showed up at the front gate. I didn't open it. Instead, I patched into the intercom. 'Mr. Harper,' he said, 'can you comment on the accusations against Ms. Dabbs?' 'Nope.' 'Is it true she was targeting you because you weren't part of the HOA?' 'I guess you'll have to wait and watch the trial.' Then I cut the feed. That night, I made a decision. I uploaded a short video, less than 60 seconds, stitched together from the arrest footage and Karen's walk through my home. No voiceover, no music, just date, time, and a caption at the end. Private means private. This is not community leadership. This is crime. I posted it to a burner account. Within 12 hours, it had over 100,000 views. I didn't want to become a symbol, but apparently people were hungry to watch a tyrant fall. I thought things would quiet down after the search of her house. They didn't. If anything, the situation escalated. 2 days later, I received a subpoena. Karen's defense attorney had filed a motion demanding access to my internal surveillance records. Full context of alleged footage. The document read. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on the envelope. Context. The only context they'd get was me doing exactly what I had every right to do, secure my home. But still, I forwarded it to my attorney, Ava Levine, who responded with a single sentence. "They're desperate. I liked her already." At the preliminary hearing, Karen showed up in a gray pantsuit 2 sizes too tight, wearing a pearl necklace that screamed, "Trust me." She looked like someone playing dress-up for a court drama. Her new lawyer, not the one who'd initially contacted me, made a weak argument about intent and community oversight gone wrong. The judge wasn't impressed. Neither was the prosecutor, who played segments of the footage in open court. When the jury saw Karen casually walking through my daughter's room while saying she'd get CPS involved, several people shifted in their seats. One woman on the back bench muttered Jesus under her breath. Karen tried to keep her composure, but when they showed the wine theft, her hand visibly twitched. The judge denied her request for bail. "You have demonstrated poor boundaries and an alarming degree of entitlement," she said. The court finds a high likelihood of witness intimidation or further boundary violations. Karen was escorted out, wrists cuffed behind her back. Outside the courtroom, I ran into a guy in a faded flannel and jeans. He looked nervous but determined, introduced himself as Tom, another resident of Hollow Ridge Heights. Told me he'd been on the HOA board for 2 years before Karen ousted him under suspicious circumstances. She said my sighting violated color code standards, he said. I'd lived there for 18 years. I raised an eyebrow. And she manufactured the violation, sent me fake guidelines she printed herself. I still have the PDF. That afternoon, I met with Ava and dumped every neighbor's email, message, and document onto her desk. We made a list. It included 3 illegal entries Karen had made under false pretenses, 2 instances of forged HOA violation notices, 1 fake plumbing citation used to justify forcing access into a backyard, and a series of board meeting minutes that had been suspiciously edited after the fact. The evidence pile was growing into a mountain. A week later, Ava called me, her voice buzzing with energy. "We just got access to some archived communications from the HOA server. You're going to love this." Turns out Karen had been sending emails to select board members with explicit instructions on dealing with non-compliant properties. One thread said, "The Harper family needs to be neutralized. Surveillance, documentation, strategic complaints. I don't care if he's not in the HOA. In spirit, he should be." Another email was even worse. She forwarded a property tax record of mine with the subject line, "Let's find pressure points." I felt that in my spine. That wasn't neighborhood management. That was harassment. Targeted, coordinated, premeditated harassment. Morales called the next day. "We're expanding the charges," he said. "Attempted evidence fabrication, harassment, possibly identity theft." She accessed private records she had no authority to touch. Karen's defense began to crumble. Her lawyer tried to argue that she'd misunderstood her powers, that the boundaries were unclear, that she was merely overzealous. But every new document, every witness, every statement made it obvious. She hadn't misunderstood. She'd engineered all of it. Then the big one dropped. A woman named Teresa, a quiet widow who lived 3 blocks over, came forward with a notarized statement. In 2021, she'd briefly left town to care for her sister. While she was gone, Karen had allegedly forged her signature on a land access document that granted HOA easement rights over Teresa's backlot. When Teresa returned, she found a gravel path and HOA utility access gate installed behind her garden. She'd been afraid to speak out. Until now. That forgery? It was a felony. They added it to the charges. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. It was no longer about a trespassing incident. It was about a power-hungry HOA president who thought she was above the law. The prosecutor's tone turned surgical, precise, unrelenting. By the end of the week, Karen was facing 7 criminal counts, and every local news outlet had her mugshot in rotation. I wasn't watching out of vengeance. I was watching because I wanted to make sure she didn't wriggle out of this like she had so many times before. This time, she'd run headfirst into something she couldn't control. My house, my rules, and now the full weight of the justice system. I thought the hard part was over. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen was behind bars, and the HOA was backpedaling so hard they were practically moonwalking. But then came the civil suit. From them. Let me be specific. Karen Dabbs and the Hollow Ridge Heights HOA v. Matthew Harper. The claim, defamation, emotional distress, and digital entrapment. Digital entrapment, that was a new one. According to the suit, my surveillance system had created a hostile environment for Karen and deliberately induced behavior to produce damaging evidence. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch drywall. I sat in Ava's office reading the paperwork, my hands starting to cramp from clenching the pages. "She's suing me?" I asked. "She's trying to flip the narrative," Ava said calmly. "Paint herself as the victim. It's bold. Suicidal, but bold. She wasn't wrong. The irony of being accused of creating a trap in my own house with my own legally installed system was absurd. I hadn't lured Karen in. She'd wandered in like a raccoon looking for food, and now she was mad she got caught in the security lights. The worst part, the HOA backed her, or at least the 3 remaining board members did. The 4th had resigned, citing moral discomfort. A 5th was mysteriously unreachable. I had a guess where he went, as far from this dumpster fire as possible, but the suit forced us into depositions. Karen sat across the table in a drab beige room, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they hated their own client. She was still smug, still wearing that I'm in charge expression, but it was slipping at the edges. She kept referring to my home as the subject structure. I refused to bite. Ava did the talking, calm, methodical, razor sharp. When asked why I had such an elaborate security system, I responded simply, because it's my career. I secure financial institutions from cyber and physical breaches. Why wouldn't I protect my family the same way? Karen rolled her eyes. When asked whether Karen had been explicitly invited or authorized to enter my home, I said, not unless you count psychosis as permission. Ava gently kicked my foot under the table. Withdrawn, she said. The court reporter smirked. The HOA's case unraveled quickly. First, we presented the full footage of the intrusion, including time-stamped access logs and the automated sheriff's alert. Then came the email threads, the ones where Karen talked about neutralizing me. Finally, the real gut punch. Ava filed a countersuit, invasion of privacy, trespass, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and attempted misappropriation of property through manufactured compliance actions. The judge allowed every single count to proceed. That same afternoon, Morales called me again. You're not going to believe what we found now. He sounded tired, like a man who'd just uncovered one more dead raccoon in a collapsing house. Apparently, during the deeper forensic sweep of Karen's tablet, investigators found an unencrypted folder titled HOA Strategic OPS. Inside were dozens of PDFs, including one labeled OPS's Harper Full.df. It included my LinkedIn profile annotated with key influence targets, screenshots of my wife's Facebook page with notes like, likes local politics, use if needed, a map of the neighborhood with red circles around problem lots, AI flowchart, an actual goddamn flowchart outlining how to get a property transferred into compliance, surveillance, evidence fabrication, HOA board vote, county complaint, emergency inspection. It was like finding the manifesto of a suburban warlord. Morales' team looped in a state-level investigator. He suggested that Karen might have violated multiple state statutes, including conspiracy to commit fraud and illegal access of protected personal data. The list of potential charges grew longer. Her attorney tried to claim she was collecting information for routine compliance. The investigator laughed, loudly. That night, I hosted a few neighbors at my place. The ones who'd come forward, Tom, Anita, Steve, and even quiet old Teresa. I served whiskey and chili, and for the first time since this started, we actually laughed. Steve raised his glass. To HOA tyranny, may it rot. To your house, Tom added, the only damn place in the neighborhood that fought back. I looked around. These people weren't radicals or troublemakers. They were normal, hard-working homeowners who'd been bullied for years and hadn't known how to fight back. I just happened to be the one with the right tools and zero patience for power trips. The next day, someone spray-painted fraudulent tyrant on the HOA office's vinyl siding. It wasn't me, but I didn't shed a tear. The day Karen fired her attorney, I knew we were getting close to the edge. It happened mid-hearing. We were in court for a procedural update, mostly paperwork, when she suddenly stood up and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, my legal counsel has betrayed me. I no longer recognized this representation. Her lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a thumbtack. The judge blinked. Ms. Dabbs, are you terminating your attorney? Yes, she snapped, as if she were firing a mailroom intern. I will represent myself. There was a brief, almost reverent silence. Even the clerk paused mid-keystroke. Then the judge exhaled through her nose and said, God help us all. From that point forward, the trial entered a new phase. Chaos. Karen began filing motions, hand-typed, incoherent, littered with typos and phrases like citizens' jurisdictional override. One argued that since I wasn't a member of the HOA, I had no standing to sue her. Another accused me of weaponizing code enforcement. One actually cited suburban constitutionalism as a defense. The judge started scheduling status checks weekly just to manage the mess. Meanwhile, Morales called again. "We finally cracked her backup email accounts," he said, "and you won't believe what we found." I braced myself. Turns out Karen had been corresponding with a local real estate speculator, a man named Daniel Preve, known for buying distressed properties and flipping them through HOA channels. Their emails outlined a plan to force non-HOA homeowners, like me, into selling under pressure. The plan relied on a mix of zoning complaints, social isolation, and strategic incident creation. Karen had sent him photos of my house, inside and out. It was all there in writing. When Ava saw the documents, her eyes practically glowed. "This isn't just abuse of power. This is racketeering." We submitted the correspondence to the district attorney's office. They moved fast. Karen was hit with 2 new charges: conspiracy to commit property fraud and unlawful surveillance for financial gain. This time, bail was explicitly denied. Back in court, Karen tried to claim the emails were faked. The DA responded by presenting IP logs, timestamps, and forensic analysis from 3 different agencies. She changed tactics. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed during one session. "He provoked this. He dared me. He lured me into that house with all his gadgets." The courtroom fell silent. "Ma'am," the judge said slowly, "are you claiming you were tricked into breaking into a home?" Karen's face twitched. "I was investigating while taking wine and printing forged inspection reports." That wine was unsealed. It wasn't. The DA played footage again. Karen, mid-step, pocketing the bottle. The timestamp clearly showed she'd twisted the cork only after reaching the front porch. It was a death sentence, not just for her credibility, but for the entire HOA, because by then the rest of the board had turned on her. 3 of the original members had resigned. The HOA management company had issued a statement denying all knowledge of Karen's private investigations. One brave soul named Lillian, former treasurer, testified that Karen had coerced her into falsifying maintenance complaints against targeted homeowners. She said Matt was too loud, Lillian said on the stand. "I live 6 houses away. I've never heard a peep." The community had had enough. Signs started popping up on fences and front lawns. "Disband Hollow Ridge HOA. Karen doesn't speak for us. My lawn, my rights." Then came the audit. A state oversight panel, prompted by the DA's office, launched a full investigation into Hollow Ridge Heights HOA's finances. And guess what? Karen had been dipping into the discretionary repair fund. $12,000 in miscellaneous reimbursements. Over $8,000 spent on consultations. $5,000 unaccounted for from the holiday lighting budget, despite the fact that that year no lights had ever been installed. A forensic accountant traced several payments to a business Karen owned under her maiden name, Dabbs Community Solutions LLC. She'd been paying herself. It wasn't just theft. It was organized, systemic corruption. The HOA's remaining members panicked. They called an emergency vote to suspend all operations. Homeowners held a town hall meeting and demanded dissolution. I was invited to speak. I stood at the podium in front of 50 people, some of whom had once defended Karen, and said one thing: you don't need governance, you need neighbors. And trust doesn't come from fines, threats, or surveillance. It comes from knowing that if someone walks into your house uninvited, we all agree it's wrong. They applauded. I wasn't interested in politics, but I was more than happy to watch the empire collapse. The trial moved faster than anyone expected. By the time summer hit its peak, the courtroom was packed nearly every session. Local press had reserved benches. Law students showed up just to watch. I spotted a few of my neighbors in the gallery every day, some curious, others grim-faced. They weren't there for drama. They were there because something sacred had been violated, and they wanted to see the reckoning with their own eyes. Karen's defense collapsed like wet cardboard. Her attempt to represent herself lasted 3 days before the court forcibly appointed her a public defender, someone who looked like he aged a decade in the first hour of cross-examination. He tried his best, but even he couldn't untangle the pile of digital and paper evidence against her. The prosecution laid everything out methodically. Entry logs from my security system showing the exact times she breached my home. Audio recordings of her admitting she was gathering ammunition. emails where she referred to neighbors as targets of behavioral correction, the PDF strategy documents, complete with steps for forced acquisition, testimony from Teresa describing the forged easement and subsequent property damage, and then came the moment that broke the courtroom. The state forensic analyst testified that one of Karen's tablets had been synced with a hidden folder on a second backup device, a drive she'd buried behind a panel in her laundry room. Inside were copies of every document she'd ever compiled on Hollow Ridge residents, hundreds of files, some dated back over 5 years. The prosecutor displayed just a few on the screen. Target Scott, possible illegal shed. Subject Gerald, questionable garden ornaments. Monitor Anita, bias toward unapproved door color. One woman in the gallery burst into tears. Another stood and walked out. I watched Karen's face. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. That, more than anything, made my blood run cold. Her mind had built an entire universe where she was the enforcer, the visionary, the only person holding the line against aesthetic entropy. She wasn't just wrong, she was proud of being wrong. After the evidence presentation concluded, the judge recessed for deliberation. It took less than a day. The verdict came in early the next morning. The courtroom filled before the doors opened. I sat near the back with Ava and my wife. Neither of us said a word. Karen stood alone as the judge read the sentencing. On counts of unlawful entry, criminal trespass, unauthorized surveillance, attempted property fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and misuse of HOA funds. This court sentences you, Karen Eliza Dabbs, to 9 years in state prison, 6 of those years to be served without eligibility for parole. There was no outburst, no gasp, just a heavy silence. Karen stood there like a statue, pale, still. For the first time, I saw it. Not fear, not regret, but disbelief. As if the world had suddenly betrayed her by finally enforcing the rules she so freely ignored. The judge continued. You wielded authority not granted to you by law, violated privacy and dignity, and undermined community trust. Your actions were not enforcement, they were domination. And the law will treat them accordingly. The bailiff escorted her away. Outside, reporters swarmed. I kept my head down and walked straight to my car. Ava caught up with me, a rare smile breaking across her face. She's gone, she said. And that HOA, it's dust. Not long after, the Hollow Ridge Heights HOA officially voted to dissolve. The paperwork was dry, administrative, utterly boring, and beautiful. The last document I received from them was a certified letter, notice of termination of all activities, signed by the interim treasurer. It came with a check enclosed, $920,000, civil damages, settled and sealed. My wife framed the check and hung it in the home office. I left it there for 2 days before taking it to the bank. We didn't need the money, but I needed the message it carried. That night, I walked the perimeter of my property. The fence sensors blinked steady green. The thermal cameras were live. The motion detectors tracked every step. I passed the front entry where Karen had first walked in, so calm, so sure she belonged, and I stopped at the threshold. I stood there for a full minute, then quietly closed the door behind me. Not a single alarm went off, because no one else would ever walk in here uninvited again. People ask me what I did with the money. Some expect a revenge purchase, a billboard saying, "Told you so," or a gold-plated mailbox with security lasers. I get it. After what happened, the idea of rubbing it in sounds tempting. But no, I didn't need that. I invested it, not just in my house, though I did upgrade the biometric access points and installed 2 new underground redundancies. Not just in my family, though we did take a long overdue road trip across the Southwest, stopping at every quiet desert inn we could find. No, I invested it into something I wished I had years ago. A startup, not a security firm. Something better. A service to help homeowners stand up to abuse, legal, technical, and bureaucratic. I called it Haven Protocol. A network of consultants, legal advisors, and engineers that work exclusively with people caught in battles with overreaching HOAs or corrupt neighborhood boards. Our motto, privacy is not optional. We offered real-time surveillance consulting, legal documentation templates, public record access tutorials, and perhaps most importantly, psychological support. You'd be surprised how many people feel like they're losing their minds when they're told the paint on their mailbox could void their mortgage. We took our first 5 clients within 2 months, and then word spread. By the end of the year, I'd spoken on 2 panels, consulted with a county judge on HOA overreach statutes, and provided expert testimony in a case out of Nevada involving a woman whose HOA tried to condemn her solar panels. They called my case the Harper precedent in filings. It's funny. I used to just build security systems, steel, sensors, wires. Now I built something else, resilience, for people like me, for people like you. Hollow Ridge changed, slowly, quietly. Without Karen, the community reorganized under a voluntary council. No fines, no anonymous complaints, no board elections fueled by gossip and petty ambition. Just neighbors talking like neighbors. Tom was elected chair. Anita runs the shared tool shed. Even Teresa, who once feared HOA retaliation, hosts monthly garden swaps. I stopped by the last one, brought strawberries, left with rosemary and enough heirloom tomatoes to stock a restaurant. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood, my daughter asked me, "Is the house safe now?" I looked at her, then at the trees beyond the fence line. "It always was," I said. "We just had to prove it." Because in the end, the home wasn't just 4 walls or a patch of earth. It was the right to be left alone, the right to exist without someone pounding on your door, demanding obedience to a rule book they wrote for control. And that, finally, had been secured.